Welcome back, everyone. I'm Zell, and today we're going to get a look and see what's inside the Eschaton. Alright, before we dig into this is the Eschaton. This is the Isham Blade Works and we collaboration, and it is an interesting knife. Just getting a look at it from the outside, all of the really fancy wire EDM cuts and milling, and all the wire EDM and milling and grinding on the blade. A lot of time spent building these knives, and the construction on them, as we get into it here, is rather interesting. We have an integral piece here, which, as you can see, all one piece of titanium. It goes back to these two pieces of carbon fiber, and wow, it's just an interesting setup. So let's get into it. Cool thing is T8. That's all we need to get it apart. And not just T8, but they're using those really good T8 screws that they're making over there. Just absolutely beautiful. So let's get into this thing, and we are going to do a full and complete teardown on this knife, because I know many of you out there would like to know what's inside and what makes this thing tick, but you got this limited edition knife and you don't want to have to take it apart. So we can and will take this one apart, so we're going to get a full teardown. Start right there with our pocket clip, and we're going to get a little more in detail with this knife than we normally do. Get a look at each one of the parts. There is our pocket clip, and pocket clip does work fairly well. There's our little pocket clip screw, and the pocket clip fits right there in that recess that's been milled out. From here, we're going to, how do I want to go about this? All right, we're going to see if we can get the pivot apart. So get a T8 in here. There's our collar, our pivot screw. And interesting what they've done here, they've taken a standard WE pivot and they've milled both sides off of it so it'll fit down in this slot in the knife. Very nicely done, actually. I rather like that. They maintain their WE branding without messing with Elijah's design. We're going to push the pivot out. You see what I did there? I took the pressure off the lock bar, and I'm going to push the pivot all the way out so that we can set the blade out. And they did the same thing on this side of the WE pivot. They've milled the sides off of it so it'll fit down in that area on the knife. Very nicely done. Get a look at our blade, and wow, there's just a lot of wire EDM and milling on this blade. You got essentially 3 cutting surfaces as bevel anyhow. You got the bevel here, you got another short bevel here that connects up with this forward bevel that gives you basically 3 different cutting surfaces. Now, we'll get into that whenever we do an actual review, but this is definitely a yes, we can do this, super cool knife. Will it work for your EDC knife? Well, of course it will, but it's not going to be your best choice, obviously. The big holes in the blade and the such. On with the disassembly. See, there we go. Everything fell out. That's convenient. Now we don't have to dig those washers out of there. And our lock bar right here has 2 screws that hold it in place. We have a screw here that's going through the titanium into the lock bar, and we have a screw here that's going through the carbon fiber and into the lock bar, and possibly through the titanium too. We'll get a look at that as we go along, but we're going to pull the carbon fiber off, and if I remember correctly, we can leave the lock bar on there initially. one. There's email dinging at me. Pull out the screws on the other side. I guess we really had to do that. We could have pulled that side off already, but we didn't, so. There we go. And that is one side of your Eschaton right there. We're using the carbon fiber as the stop pin retainer, bearing retainer. Very nicely milled out CF there. Ooh. Look how thin that stuff is right there where it attaches to the titanium. Wonder how many of those got broke in the mill. Pull our stop pin out, and that side is going to come off too. And I did that so that we could see this here. This is your lock bar, inset lock bar, or whatever you'd like to call it. You have the hole here where this lays over the top, and that goes through the titanium and screws into the lock bar. This goes through the titanium right into the lock bar. This one also goes through the carbon fiber, obviously. So we'll go ahead and pop the lock bar off there, and we'll get a look at our various parts and then get to putting it back together. One thing to be aware of if you take one of these knives apart, each one of these little screws, not each one of them, but there are several different sizes of little screws. It's not like taking most of the wee knives apart. Because of the way this thing works, there had to be different screw lengths. They're all, I think, the same diameter, which means in the same screw thread, so means that they will fit in the hole, but they'll either be too short or too long. There's your lock bar. Here's our integral piece. We have the Isham with the logo and the Eschaton down it. Very nicely done there. Get a look at our CF pieces. Very nicely cut. Very nicely cut. There's your lock bar cutout. Just really well done. Get a look at the blade one more time. And, you know, we did a really good job bringing this thing to life. I had spoke to Elijah about this knife, and this was one that he wasn't sure that was ever going to get produced in mass production. He really thought this was one that at some point in his career, whenever he got to the point where he was making his own knives, it's really one he thought would end up being a personal custom that he made. But Joe and the team over at We Knives saw the drawings of it, and they wanted to take a stab at it. And Elijah, if you want to correct me, go right ahead, but if I remember correctly, this was, instead of a 3-piece design, this was like a 5-piece design. And through CAD and CAM and the miracle of the engineers over there at We, they reduced the parts count down to 3 pieces, 3 main pieces, and maintained the look of the knife, which is pretty impressive. I've seen some of what Elijah had for the original, and just pretty impressive what we did to make this thing come alive and to make Elijah happy with it. And now we've got it all pretty much cleaned up. That was a nearly new knife, so nothing really to make a mess of. However, you guys know the deal. We've got to get the stuff out, the Vibratite, so we can put this thing back together. So I'm going to get that. One little thing I didn't mention on the Vibratite, you should do this before you use it. So there you go, we shook it up. This particular nail polish bottle has a little BB in it to help you whenever you're mixing it up. I don't know if all of them have that or not. I don't order these bottles. Susie Nails It takes care of that. So there you go. And I'm going to dope up all of our little screws. I really need to get me a set of pliers to hold these things so I don't get the sticky stuff on my fingers. And be sure, once again, to keep your screws all separated out so that you get them back in the right places. There's that one screw down here for the lock bar is considerably shorter than the rest of them, and your pocket clip screw is considerably longer. See that little bitty tiny screw right there? Ooh, you'd think my hands have been working or something. Goodness. Yeah, maybe they have. Well, now that we got everything gooped up, you guys know the drill. Immediately for you, 30 seconds or 30 minutes for me, and we'll put this guy back together. I'll clean her all up and we'll be ready to go here in about a half an hour. Alright, so let's get this guy back together. And this may be the most interesting part. First, I think we're going to put our lock bar insert back in place. And probably need to wipe that off a little bit. Guess I should have did a better job cleaning all this up, huh? But I want to get that back in place with this little short screw. That's the smallest screw out of the whole mess for this knife. And all of these screws, this is one knife where if you get one screw goofed up, or not in the right place, or not snug, this knife will not work right. So we're going to set that aside for now because I want to put together this piece here, our pivot assembly. And we're going to do that just like we would on any other knife that just had two handle slabs. Gonna do that. I am gonna check another one of these just to be sure about something. See what, okay, so we are doing it right. I want to get the pivot screws on the proper side. Not that it matters really in the big scheme of things, but since these are limited edition knives, we definitely want to get them back together in the proper order. Okay, got our backing washer there. Get our 10 weight nano oil out. And people ask about the nano oil. Is it something special? Kinda, but not as special as you might think. We're going to put this bearing in here. Our counter bore is in the carbon fiber, so we're going to put the closed side of the bearing race up right there. Back to the nano oil. The cool thing about the nano oil is that it works. It works fine. But, you know, I used gun lubricant for a long time, and it worked fine, too. The deal with the nano oil is you can get it in different weights. And because you can get it in different weights, you can kind of dial in what you need at specific places. Like, I generally use the 10 weight, but if you guys have watched very many of my disassemblies, you know that I use the 85 weight in the pivot hole, which we're going to do right now. And most other types of knife oils don't have the varying weights, so I wouldn't be able to do that. I just have to put in whatever. And the 85 weight stays down in that hole better and allows that detent ball over here to pick up just a little bit of oil whenever it's sitting down there in the hole in your pocket moving around, and spread it across your detent track. Very cool in my opinion. And we got our stop pin in, and we need to put our bearing up here, get the 10 weight back out, put a few drops in there. There we go. Alright, put our collar in and get our pivot screw back in the hole. Now, why did we do this and not try to do it some other way? Well, I wanted this knife to go together as much like a normal knife as I could possibly get away with. And to do that, we needed to have this part together, and now we can slide this up into the rest of the knife. And this is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. Get these lower pieces kind of in place, and then slide everything else back up in there. And if everything works out right, we're all lined up. Now I'm going to take the non-lock side, get some screws in there, and all 4 of those screws are the same length, so you don't have to worry so much there. There we go. If you do take your Eschaton apart, I am going to highly suggest that you, at the very least, use Loctite. I'm going to suggest Vibratite. That's what I use. Because this knife does not have any long screws in it like you might find in some other models. All the screws, because of the way it's constructed, are fairly short. And don't get yourself cut there, but you want to make sure that screw right there goes into that lock bar. I don't know if you can see that very well there or not, but both of these screws right here, this one and this one, they need to be through that lock bar, or the lock bar and the knife won't work properly. Got one more screw here. Get our pocket clip back on it. Snaps right down in there. And we got some play up here now. I left that loose so that I could get these wings, if you will, out around the rest of the knife. And now we're going to have to snug it up. There we go. I can feel everything pulling together. Very good. Got no blade play, which is what we want. And there we go. So guys, that is what's inside your WE and Isham Blade Works Eschaton. Very, very cool design. Pretty impressive to me that WE was able to pull this off. And there's a lot of what I would call fairly complicated EDM work, grinding work, and of course mill work in these knives, and they just come out absolutely beautiful. And you guys have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These are available on Blade HQ as far as I know right now, and GP Knives. So if you're looking to get your piece of modern knife art from Elijah Isham and We Knives, that's where you can get a hold of it. You guys have a great day. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.